My dad always favored my cousin over me because I was a mistake for him. He chose to fund my cousin's college tuition and ruin my career by not giving me anything, but karma had different plans. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but recent events have made me realize that sometimes, life has a way of balancing things out. For context, I'm a 28-year-old guy named Alex. My cousin, let's call him Brad, is the same age as me. We grew up in the same small town, went to the same schools, and were raised more like brothers than cousins. The only difference? Brad was the golden child, and I was the family disappointment. You see, I was an accident. My parents were young and unprepared when they had me. My mom was just 19, and my dad was 21. They were high school sweethearts who thought they'd have plenty of time to live their dreams before settling down. But then I came along and changed everything. My aunt and uncle, on the other hand, had Brad exactly when they planned to. They were established in their careers, had a nice house, and were ready to be parents. From the moment Brad was born, he was showered with love and attention from the entire family, especially my dad. Growing up, I always felt like I was living in Brad's shadow. He was smart, athletic, and charming. I wasn't bad at school or sports, but I was never quite as good as Brad. It didn't help that my dad constantly compared us. "Why can't you get straight A's like Brad?" he'd ask when I brought home a report card with mostly B's. "Brad made the varsity team as a freshman. You should try harder," he'd say when I didn't make the cut. It wasn't just the comparisons that hurt. It was the way my dad's eyes would light up when Brad walked into the room, the pride in his voice when he talked about Brad's accomplishments. I never saw that look or heard that tone when it came to me. Don't get me wrong, my mom tried her best to make up for it. She was always supportive and loving, but she worked long hours as a nurse to help make ends meet. Plus, she couldn't completely shield me from the favoritism that was so blatant in our family. Things came to a head when we graduated high school. Brad, unsurprisingly, got into an Ivy League school. I managed to get accepted into a decent state university. It wasn't Ivy League, but it was still a good school, and I was proud of myself. The day after graduation, our whole extended family gathered for a barbecue. My dad stood up to make a toast, and what he said next changed the course of my life. "I'm so proud of both our boys for graduating," he started, and for a moment, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally going to acknowledge my achievements too. But then he continued, "Brad, your future is bright, and we want to make sure you have every opportunity to succeed. That's why your aunt and I have decided to fully fund your college education." The air left my lungs. I looked at my mom, who seemed just as shocked as I was. My dad hadn't discussed this with her, that much was clear. To Brad, my dad raised his glass, and everyone cheered. I sat there, stunned, as Brad thanked my dad profusely. No one seemed to notice that I hadn't been included in this generous offer. No one except my mom, who squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes filled with apology and sadness. Later that night, I confronted my dad. "What about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you going to help with my tuition too?" He looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and guilt. "Alex, you know we can't afford to send both of you to college. Brad has a real shot at making something of himself. Well, you can take out loans or find a job. It'll build character." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. In that moment, I realized that in my father's eyes, I would never measure up to Brad. I was just a mistake he was stuck with, not a son he wanted to invest in. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to college. Not because I didn't want to, but because I refused to saddle myself with debt while watching my cousin get a free ride on my dad's dime. Instead, I'd find a job, any job, and make my own way in the world. The next few years were tough. While Brad was off living the college life, I was working dead-end jobs, trying to scrape together enough money to move out of my parents' house. I worked as a waiter, a retail clerk, a janitor, anything I could find. Each job was a reminder of what I'd lost, of the future that had been stolen from me. My relationship with my dad deteriorated even further. Every time Brad came home for the holidays, it was a celebration. Every time I got a promotion at my latest minimum wage job, it was met with indifference. "When are you going to get a real career?" my dad would ask, as if I hadn't been working my ass off just to survive. It was during this time that I met Sarah. She was a customer at the coffee shop where I was working, and she kept coming back, always ordering the same thing, a vanilla latte with an extra shot. One day, I worked up the courage to write my number on her cup. To my surprise, she called. We hit it off immediately. Sarah was kind, funny, and ambitious. She was working on her master's degree in social work, and her passion for helping others inspired me. For the first time in years, I felt seen and valued. Sarah didn't care that I didn't have a degree or a prestigious job. She saw my work ethic, my kindness, and my potential. With her encouragement, I started to believe in myself again. 2 years into our relationship, I proposed. It wasn't anything fancy, I couldn't afford much, but Sarah said it was perfect. We planned a small wedding, inviting only close friends and family. When I told my parents about the engagement, my mom was thrilled. My dad's reaction? "Are you sure you can afford a wedding? Maybe you should wait until you have a better job." I was hurt but not surprised. By this point, I'd learned to expect disappointment from him. The wedding day arrived, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. Sarah looked radiant, and as we exchanged vows, I felt like my life was finally on the right track. During the reception, my dad pulled me aside. I braced myself for criticism, but what he said shocked me. "Son, I know I haven't always been the best father to you," he began, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "Seeing you today, how happy you are, how much Sarah loves you. It's made me realize how wrong I've been. I'm proud of you, Alex. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to say it." I stood there, stunned. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell him it was too little, too late. But another part, the part that had always craved his approval, felt a warmth spreading through my chest. "Thanks, Dad," I managed to say. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As we rejoined the party, I caught sight of Brad. He was sitting alone at a table, nursing a drink. I hadn't seen him much since he graduated college 3 years ago. Last I heard, he was working for a big finance firm in New York. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached him. "Hey, Brad. How's life in the big city?" He looked up at me, and I was taken aback by how tired he looked. It's not what I expected," he admitted. "The job's brutal. 80-hour weeks, cutthroat competition. I'm good at it, but I'm not happy." I didn't know what to say. This was a side of Brad I'd never seen before. "You know," he continued, "I've always envied you, Alex." I almost laughed out loud. "Me? Why would you envy me?" Brad sighed. "You've always known who you are. You work hard, you're genuine, and now you have this amazing wife who clearly adores you. I have a fancy degree and a high-paying job, but I'm miserable. And I'm alone." As I listened to Brad, I felt a shift inside me. All these years, I'd been so focused on what I didn't have, on how unfair everything was, that I'd failed to see what I did have. I had found love, I had developed resilience, and I had stayed true to myself. That conversation with Brad was a turning point. It made me realize that the golden child life I'd envied for so long wasn't all it was cracked up to be. More importantly, it made me appreciate my own journey. After the wedding, Sarah and I moved to a nearby city where she had been offered a job at a nonprofit. I decided it was time to pursue my own dreams. With Sarah's support, I enrolled in community college, taking night classes while working during the day. It wasn't easy, but I was motivated in a way I'd never been before. I threw myself into my studies, discovering a passion for computer science that I never knew I had. My grades were excellent, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly excelling at something. 2 years later, I transferred to a 4-year university to complete my degree. By this time, Sarah and I had a little girl, Emma. Balancing work, school, and family was challenging, but it was also incredibly rewarding. During this time, my relationship with my parents slowly improved. My mom had always been supportive, but now my dad was making an effort too. He would offer to babysit Emma, giving Sarah and me some much-needed alone time. He even offered to help with my tuition, but I declined. This was something I needed to do on my own. As for Brad, he eventually quit his job in finance and moved back to our hometown. He seemed lost for a while, unsure of what to do with his life now that the path he'd always been on had proven unfulfilling. It was strange to see him struggle while I was finally finding my footing. Fast forward to my graduation day. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I saw my family in the audience. My mom was crying happy tears, Emma was waving excitedly, and my dad. My dad was beaming with pride. The same look he used to reserve for Brad was now directed at me. After the ceremony, my dad pulled me aside. "Alex," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology. A big one. I was so wrong about you, about everything. You've accomplished all of this on your own, despite the obstacles I put in your way. I'm so proud of you, son. Not just for this degree, but for the man you've become, the father you are to Emma. I hope you can forgive me for all the years I failed you." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was the moment I'd been waiting for my entire life. "Thanks, Dad," I said, pulling him into a hug. "That means a lot." As we embraced, I saw Brad watching us from across the room. There was no jealousy in his eyes, just a mixture of sadness and what looked like respect. I realized then that the rivalry between us had always been more in my head than in reality. We had both been victims of my father's misguided favoritism in different ways. After graduation, things moved quickly. I landed a job at a growing tech startup, where my combination of practical experience and theoretical knowledge proved invaluable. Within a year, I was leading my own team. Sarah's career was thriving too, and we were able to buy our first house. Brad, meanwhile, had started working at our uncle's small construction company. It was a far cry from his high-flying finance career, but he seemed happier, more grounded. We started hanging out more, and I discovered that without the weight of family expectations, we actually got along pretty well. One day, about 2 years after my graduation, I received a call from my dad. He sounded excited. "Alex, I have some news," he said. "I'm retiring, and I've decided to sell the family business. I want you to have half of the proceeds." I was stunned. The family business, a moderately successful local hardware store, had been in our family for generations. I had always assumed it would go to Brad. "But what about Brad?" I asked. "I've already spoken to him," my dad replied. "He agrees that this is the right thing to do. He said, and I quote, 'Alex deserves it. He's earned it.'" I was overwhelmed. This wasn't just about the money, although that was certainly significant. This was my dad's way of making amends, of trying to right the wrongs of the past. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice cracking. "This means more than you know." The irony wasn't lost on me. My dad's decision to fund Brad's education had initially felt like it had ruined my chances at a career. But in reality, it had set me on a path that led to personal growth, a loving family, and a career I was passionate about. And now, in a twist of fate, I was receiving a substantial financial windfall anyway. But the real wealth I had accumulated wasn't in my bank account. It was in the resilience I had developed, the family I had built, and the sense of self-worth I had cultivated despite the odds. As I sit here writing this, Emma is playing in the backyard with her little brother, Jack. Sarah is working on a presentation for a new community outreach program she's spearheading. My parents are coming over for dinner later, and Brad might join us too. Life isn't perfect. There are still moments of tension, old wounds that haven't fully healed. But we're all trying, and that counts for something. To anyone out there who feels like the family disappointment, who's struggling under the weight of unfair expectations or comparisons, I want you to know this: your worth isn't determined by someone else's perception of you. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You have value simply because you exist. Your path might not be the one others have chosen for you, but that doesn't make it any less valid or valuable. Keep pushing forward, stay true to yourself, and remember that sometimes, life has a funny way of working things out. Karma, fate, cosmic justice, whatever you want to call it, sometimes it comes through in the most unexpected ways. My dad's favoritism and decision to fund my cousin's education instead of mine felt like it had ruined my chances at a good career. But in the end, it set me on a path to something much better than I could have imagined. So if you're in a tough spot right now, feeling overlooked or undervalued, hang in there. Your time will come. And when it does, you'll be stronger, wiser, and more appreciative of it because of everything you've been through. As for me, I'm just grateful. Grateful for the struggles that shaped me, for the family that supports me, and for the unexpected twists of fate that brought me where I am today. Life has a way of balancing things out, you just have to be patient enough to see it through. It's been 5 years since I last updated this post, and so much has happened that I felt compelled to share. Life has a way of continually surprising us, doesn't it? First, the good news: Sarah and I are still going strong. Our kids, Emma and Jack, are growing up fast, too fast, if you ask me. Emma's about to start middle school, and she's already showing signs of being a brilliant little programmer. Must run in the family, I guess. Jack's in 2nd grade and is obsessed with dinosaurs. Our house is filled with plastic T-Rexes and Triceratops, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Career-wise, things have been interesting. Remember that tech startup I was working for? Well, 2 years ago, we got acquired by a major tech giant. Suddenly, my stock options were worth, well, let's just say it was life-changing money. Sarah and I spent a lot of late nights discussing what to do with it. In the end, we decided to use a portion to set up college funds for Emma and Jack. Ironic, I know, donate a significant amount to education-focused charities, and invest the rest. But here's where things get really interesting. I decided to leave the corporate world. With our newfound financial security, I realized I had the opportunity to do something I'd always dreamed of but never thought possible: start my own business. So, I founded a small tech consultancy, focusing on helping nonprofits and small businesses optimize their operations through technology. It's been challenging, but incredibly rewarding. I get to use my skills to make a real difference in people's lives, and I have the flexibility to be there for my family in a way I never could before. Sarah's career has taken off too. She's now the director of social services for our entire county. She works long hours sometimes, but the passion she has for her work is inspiring. We make a good team, balancing each other out and supporting each other's dreams. Now, you might be wondering about my dad and Brad. Well, that's where things have taken some unexpected turns. My relationship with my dad has continued to improve over the years. He's become a doting grandfather, always eager to babysit or attend school events. He's even taken an interest in my work, often asking questions about the latest technology trends. It's a far cry from the distant, critical father of my youth. We've had many deep conversations over the years, addressing the pain of the past and working towards true forgiveness. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it. As for Brad, life threw him some curveballs. About 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with a chronic illness. It's manageable, but it forced him to reevaluate his life once again. He had to step back from the physical demands of construction work and was at a loss for what to do next. That's when an unexpected opportunity arose. The local community college was looking for someone to teach a course on business fundamentals. Despite his rocky experience in the corporate world, Brad did have a solid foundation in business theory from his college days. He applied for the position and, to his surprise, got it. Turns out, Brad has a real knack for teaching. His students love him, and for the first time in a long time, he feels like he's making a positive impact. He's even started taking additional courses to expand his teaching qualifications. It's been amazing to see him find his calling. In an ironic twist, Brad recently approached me for advice on incorporating more technology into his curriculum. We spent a whole weekend brainstorming ideas, and it was fun. Genuinely fun. We're planning to co-teach a workshop on tech in small businesses next semester. If you had told me 10 years ago that Brad and I would be collaborating on anything, I would have laughed in your face. Life is funny that way. My dad's reaction to all of this has been interesting to watch. He's proud of both of us now, in different ways. He brags about my business success to his golf buddies, but he also beams with pride when he talks about the impact Brad is having on his students. It's like he's finally learned to appreciate us for who we are, not who he wanted us to be. Last Thanksgiving, as we all sat around the table, my parents, Sarah and the kids, Brad and his longtime girlfriend, I had a moment of clarity. The family dynamics that had caused me so much pain in my youth had transformed into something beautiful. We're not perfect, but we're real. We've all grown, learned, and found our own paths to happiness and fulfillment. I realized that the karma I thought I was experiencing 5 years ago wasn't about evening the score or getting what I deserved. It was about each of us finding our way, sometimes through difficult and unexpected paths, to where we needed to be. For me, it was through the struggle of making my own way. For Brad, it was through the humbling experiences of failure and illness. For my dad, it was through the slow, sometimes painful process of recognizing his mistakes and working to rectify them. As I looked around that table, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Grateful for the struggles that shaped me, for the family that surrounds me, and for the twists of fate that brought us all to this point. I caught my dad's eye across the table, and we shared a smile that held years of hurt, healing, and ultimately, understanding. I've learned that life isn't about competing or comparing ourselves to others, even if those others are family. It's about finding our own path, staying true to ourselves, and being open to the lessons that come from both our successes and our failures. To those who resonated with my original post, who felt overlooked or undervalued, I hope my story continues to offer some hope. Your journey is your own, and it's valid and valuable, no matter how it compares to anyone else's. Keep pushing forward, stay true to yourself, and be open to the unexpected ways life might surprise you. Success, I've learned, isn't about money or status or outdoing others. It's about finding fulfillment, building meaningful relationships, and making a positive impact in whatever way you can. By that measure, I feel incredibly successful, and I hope that wherever you are in your journey, you can find that kind of success too. Life will always have its ups and downs. There will be moments of doubt, of frustration, of feeling like you're not where you're supposed to be. But remember this, every experience is shaping you, preparing you for something you might not even be able to imagine right now. 5 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I thought karma had balanced the scales, and that was that. Now, I realize that life is an ongoing journey of growth, forgiveness, and discovery. Who knows where we'll be 5 years from now? The thought excites me. So, to everyone reading this, keep going. Your story isn't over. The challenges you're facing today might be preparing you for opportunities you can't even conceive of right now. Stay open, stay resilient, and most importantly, stay true to yourself. And to my younger self, the one who felt like a mistake, who thought he'd never measure up, I wish I could tell you that it all works out in the end. But the truth is, it's not about how it works out. It's about how you grow, how you learn, and how you turn your struggles into strengths. You're stronger than you know, and your future is brighter than you can imagine. Life is a long game. Play it with patience, with kindness, and with hope. Your time will come, and when it does, you'll appreciate it all the more because of the journey it took to get there. As for me, I'm excited for whatever comes next. There will undoubtedly be more challenges, more growth, more unexpected turns. But I'm ready for them. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every ending is just a new beginning in disguise. So here's to new beginnings, to second chances, and to the beautiful, unpredictable journey of life. May we all find the strength to face our challenges, the wisdom to learn from them, and the grace to help others along the way.